Okay, great. So Keauna, I'm so happy that we're getting a chance to speak. I know it's one-on-one instead of you being a part of the panel. So for everyone out there, just so you all know, Keauna is one of the original folks who was going to be on our panel, Black Women in Education. As most of you all know, we had a bit of a Zoom bomb attack. And so we've come back, but unfortunately, Keauna couldn't make it to be on the panel, but we're still going to have a chance to really listen to her words because I think it's just so important and powerful that we have spaces for Black women to really elevate our voices, to talk a lot about the things that are going on with us in the community. And we also don't necessarily believe in preaching to the choir, right? So that's why you're here. This is why it's an open forum. What's also amazing is that you're getting thousands of dollars worth of expertise, intelligence, and just fire for free for being here. And so that's one of the reasons why we started the I Am a Black Woman, Yes, I Matter series. It was an in-person series, and now we have moved it virtually. And through all of your generous support, we've been able to bring so much good quality programming. So Keauna, I want to just, sister, I just want to thank you for being here, for taking the time. This is I like to tell people all the time, this is the emotional tax that we talk about as Black women, as Black people, the things that we do to really elevate our voices. And so I want to just thank you for taking the time to do that, for being the courageous person to be here with me again and to do it again and to make
no worries.
These voices out there. So Keauna, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to start off by, first of all, saying I'm sorry if I couldn't make it live, but I definitely appreciate the opportunities to still be able to participate, even if in a different format. So thank you again for considering me for this panel and allowing me to share, I would say, my 2 cents. I know you said this is thousands of dollars worth of advice. I'm just going to add my 2 cents in there. And then feel free to, hopefully it'll be valuable for you to apply in how you guys move going forward. But just to give you a little bit of background about me, my name is Keauna Mason, born and raised in Los Angeles. But I think what's driven me to this point is the fact that I am a first-generation college student. And so when I look back on how I can give back, or if I knew then what I know now, I try to provide underserved communities with just resources or access to myself and my experience, if I could just help them avoid some of the pitfalls that I have experienced along the way, along my journey. That's kind of my goal and what I feel like my purpose here is on earth. And how I'm doing that in one regard as it relates to education is I work for an organization called Management Leaders for Tomorrow, MLT, and I am a part-time coach for the Career Prep program, which basically is an 18-month program that guides and mentors undergraduate juniors along their journey to obtaining and securing their first full-time job. In some instances, their first internship in undergrad. So, and part of that is basically preparing this demographic, which is primarily African-American, Latino, Hispanic, just prepare them for the workforce and kind of what are some of the unwritten rules that many of us have been privy to as we've kind of grown up. There's some things that are just unwritten that we're just supposed to know. But unfortunately, because some of these students are first generation college students, they didn't have resources to guide them along the way, which is what I am here for as a coach. So that's one aspect. I've done work in education in other forms. So I've partnered with UCLA Anderson School of Management and their Reardon Fellows program, which is basically a program to help underserved or underrepresented minorities who want to pursue their MBA. That program focuses on that. And then also MLT has an MBA prep program. So definitely involved in the community, served on the National Black MBA board in Los Angeles for 4 years before I moved to San Francisco. So I just try to give back however I can. My mission here is to serve. So I just want to serve the communities that I feel that could benefit from my experiences and lessons learned along the way.
Yeah, I would love to talk a little bit, and I love that you brought up this unwritten code that a lot of folks do not have access to, especially as first-generation college students. Can you give us an example or one or two of some of the unwritten codes that you're able to talk to folks about?
Sure. Just one example, just reading between the lines, right? So oftentimes, because we always assume best intent, or we try to always assume best intent, sometimes we translate that into the words that are said. So for example, a very tangible example of how I've kind of shown some of my fellows like how to read between lines. For example, if they're on their internship and in their mid-cycle, midway in that internship, they're meeting with their manager, they're having a one-on-one, and the manager says, I've noticed that you have a lot on your plate and it seems like you could possibly be overwhelmed. Is there any way I can better support you? Now, most of us know that's what's said, but what if you can read between the lines of what they may not know, they may take it as, oh, wow, my manager is really being supportive and they've offered their support. But for us, if you can read between the lines, we know that's a performance issue. Mm-hmm. Right. So if your manager observes that maybe you're overwhelmed, there's too much on your plate, and they want to know how they can better support you, you're dropping the ball somewhere. So that conversation shouldn't be taken at face value as if, oh, my manager is just checking in on me. They are, but at the same time, you're being coached. And so I think that's just one example.
Yeah. And I would love, as we talk through some of, these spaces that we're talking about, I would love to hear a little bit more about how do you navigate, right? As a Black woman, how are you navigating these positions of power that you essentially have, these spheres of influence? How are you cultivating that to really elevate the voices of Black women and Black people in general?
Yeah, I am just being, like, for example, my full-time job is at Facebook. So that's what I work full-time at Facebook, and I do MLT part-time outside of work. So I have a pretty full schedule. But at Facebook, for example, I am doing a number of things. So I'm getting involved in diversity initiatives, even in my current role, just making sure that, I'm adding a diverse perspective. That's in my current role. And then there are some levels of influence that I can't necessarily reach in my role in particular. But what I have done is reached out and have gotten mentors who are at very senior levels, and they've been allies. And I will be very transparent. I have a couple of men who they're white males, and they are, if I had to guess, in their mid-50s. And so I have been leveraging those relationships to push in areas where I personally can't push in. So getting allies who are in positions of higher influence that maybe you don't have access to in your current role, and making sure that they're true mentors, true allies, you trust them, and you can have very open and transparent conversations. And I've been able to have those transparent conversations, and they are able to push and move the needle like I can't in my current role. So, and I know sometimes it feels ironic, right?
Yeah.
It feels ironic because you think like, oh, I need an African-American mentor who is a VP or higher, where ironically, we may not have a seat at the table, but these mentors that may be white males, white females, other groups or other individuals who at top of mind don't necessarily jump to the top of the list when we're thinking about mentors, sponsors, etc. But I would say go the ally route. That's another way that I've had influence or indirect influence. Being involved in diverse issues, definitely have to have courage to be able to speak up, because I know that's very tough, especially in this environment. But I think after reflecting, people really respect it. And it's all about the how too, right? So in the how I do things, I always say there's a few approaches that you can take. One is you can take the approach that further perpetuates any potential negative stereotype that they might have about you, or the way I choose to do it is a teaching moment. I smile. I just ask. I teach through inquiry. So whenever I get pushback or questions around that might be a little bit sketchy, I'll just ask probing questions, and then I'll let them sit in that silence and awkwardness. And I smile.
About letting people sit in silence, right? It's an uncomfortable feeling. As an educator in the classroom, it's actually a tool to get kids to get folks to start talking, is to just have that uncomfortable silence, because someone is going to have to say something, right?
Yes.
At some point in time, and you just let it linger. Like, even when it feels uncomfortable to you, you just keep going, and then So I think that's great. I think the other thing that is so fascinating that you brought up is the idea of allyship, and how do you know who your allies are? How do you leverage them correctly? And so, what are some things that you think that you should that you talk to your fellows about, or anybody about, like, how do I know that someone is actually a really good ally versus they think of me as an exception to the rule of how they think about, Black folk, essentially.
And that's a good question, because I mean, it's more about the actions as opposed to the words. Like, of course, it's easy to say you're an ally. It's easy to ask the question, oh, how can we support? How can we do this? How can I be more involved? But then when you actually see the action, so for example, if you're in a meeting and something, is said that's maybe a little bit borderline or causes some eyebrows to raise, what does that ally do? Do they speak up or do they let it slide? When you express some situations that you've experienced, or for example, if you've experienced a microaggression, or you've experienced maybe during your performance review, you felt like maybe your manager was a little bit biased against a certain feedback or piece of feedback that you received, and you tell that person your experience, do they just brush it off or come to the other person's rescue, or do they inquire? Usually questions too, like if they're inquisitive about your experience and continue to ask questions in a caring way, and then are very genuine in their actions, back up what they say and show that they really want to make a difference, I think those are good key indicators as opposed to just words.
So for your fellows that are, first generation college students and also obviously looking to get into MBA programs, et cetera, do you have any reading materials or books or things that you really point them to so that you can tell our audience about as good action steps if this is the kind of world that you're trying to get into, as we start thinking about, obviously, when you think about going to college, getting your MBA, the idea is really to transform your life and hopefully the life of your community in order to access a little bit more wealth, higher salary, and also to put yourself in positions of power and have different spheres of influence. This is what you're really talking about when you're helping to cultivate our next generation of fellows that are going into this world. And I would love to hear like any sort of tips or action steps you may have for anyone in the audience who's looking to do this work, looking to step into their MBA, or have friends, family that are looking to get into this realm.
Sure. So one thing that I've noticed that a recurring theme amongst all of my fellows over the few years that I've done this, one, a lot of them experience the imposter syndrome. Two, a lot of them still are trying to figure out who they are. So some things that I suggest that they do in terms of trying to figure out who they are, right, is I'll give them a list of values, and I'll kind of explain how this ties into that MBA career move. But basically, you have a list of values, right? So when someone asks you, who are you? Oftentimes we refer to external factors, what we do, what schools we went to, who we work with, what company we work for, what position, what our title is. However, that question is really asking, who are you at your core? And often we are what we value. What are our core values? And so the reason why, and this is what I teach my fellows, understand what you value at your core, because whatever career path you go after, whatever company you choose to work for in the future, they have missions, they have values, right? Every company has a mission. Every company has values that they are aligned to. So you want to make sure that your values are aligned to those company values. And that's how a lot of times too, folks get into jobs in organizations and they feel this dissonance, they feel this uneasy spirit. And it's because something's not aligned. Either your values conflict with the company's values, or you're not staying true to yourself and going after what you're passionate about. So passion is another thing that I teach fellows. So with that being said, in addition to, even though they're only 19, 20, I try to get them to think at a strategic level early on. So I'll advise them to read the annual report, the annual financial report for the companies that they're interested in going after. So that way they can have higher level conversations during those interviews, because now they understand the business units, they understand how the company makes money, the business model. They can ask more strategic level questions around, okay, I understand I'm applying for this role, but what kind of impact does this department that I'm applying for, or the role in this department, how does that impact the larger business decisions that are being made at senior leadership level, right? So these are the questions that the fellows that I coach are coming into the interviews with at 19 and 20 years old for their internships. So that's one, reading the annual report, reading the first time manager, right? And then also having them reflect and creating plans on what they're going to do in their first 30, 60, 90 days. For the introverts, I do have some introverts. I recommend that they read a book called Quiet, and it's about introversion and then just better understanding what that feels like, how to navigate the environment with that. I too am an introvert, so that's something else that I have very personal experiences with, and have strategies on how introverts could stand out in certain environments too. Because I do believe diversity also includes introvert versus extroversion, which is another thing that I'm trying to tackle as it relates to businesses. Because when it comes to promotions, right, oftentimes those that are more outspoken, more the loudest in the room, tend to get the benefit of the doubt and are seen as leaders, whereas introverts can have the same type of ideologies and ideas, but because they're introverted, they might be seen as, oh, I don't know if that person's a good leader or not, or I don't know, right? So just trying to teach them how to navigate those environments with that type of kind of disposition.
So, during this time, we know that there has always been racial injustices, since we were born and before that, right? Like long time. Mm-hmm. There's an energy now that seems to be that people want to, at least a lot of people say that they want to change the way that they are thinking about hiring and their culture. They want to hire diversity, equity, and inclusion specialists. And, they want to do all of these things to try to ameliorate some of the racial injustices that have happened over 400 years. I'm curious around, do you have any suggestions or thoughts for MBA programs, corporations around the ways that they can really create diverse and inclusive environments?
For the actual programs themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So one thing that's very common in MBA program curriculum are case studies. And so one thing that we're looking into, for example, I graduated from Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and I was just on an alumni call last week or the weekend before. The days tend to blur at this point. But one thing that we're looking at are case studies, right? So how many protagonists in the case studies are underrepresented minorities, and really doing a deep dive. So one thing is definitely incorporating it in the actual curriculum to like business case studies, making sure that there's at least as much as we can have a more fairly distributed, diverse set of protagonists in those case studies, so that we're not just getting one perspective. Another one is something that Stanford does really well, are tea groups. And in those tea group discussions, we have a class that's very popular. It's one of the most popular electives called Touchy Feely. Well, the formal name is Interpersonal Dynamics, but the short name is Touchy Feely, because it's like you really get feely in touch with all of your emotions. Yes, and in the tea group, some of the conversation or topics could be around racial injustice, racial, how it's systemic in many of our systems across multiple sectors. So that's another way, just having more diverse, even interviewers, right? So as you apply for MBA programs, the final step in that application process is an interview. So just what does the interviewer set look like? Are they diverse, to be able to assess various diverse candidates with different backgrounds? So there's a ton of ways that MBA programs themselves can kind of overlay a diversity and inclusion lens through a lot of their processes, ranging from the curriculum to the admissions process to recruiting for their internship between their first and second year, and also the full-time recruiting cycle as well.
So we said at the beginning, like, this work is hard, right? There's an emotional tax. There's also just time and all the energy that we spend on it. I would love to hear, what are you doing for self-care to make sure that you are able to stay in this work and be healthy while doing it?
Yeah, I'm sure it's nothing that no one hasn't heard before, but it really does go a long way to take a step back, because it can be overwhelming. So just taking a step back and disconnecting for a couple of days from social media, because although we all are passionate about helping our community, sometimes it can be overwhelming if you're receiving this from you're on the job having these discussions. You come home, or not come home now, I guess you're already at home, but maybe you turn your computer off and then you turn on the TV and you're getting it from the various news sources. And then you look at your phone, and now your phone feed from all the social media platforms that you're a member of, you're seeing those. And then you're getting text messages from friends asking you, what did you think about this? Did you hear about that? So it's okay to take a step back and say, you know what, I'm going to take 24 hours, even if it's just 8 hours, and disconnect from anything that can be, at this point, stretching my emotional bandwidth to be able to continue to have these conversations.
Yeah, I think
That's what
such
I
a good
do. I step back. Yeah. And sometimes you have a sense of guilt, right? Because you feel like, oh, if I step back, maybe I'm not supporting my community. That's not true. I have those moments too. But if you step back or if you don't step back and you have nothing else to give, then also you still can't help their communities. So just step back, get a chance to refill and replenish, and then you can go back out into the world and continue to have those conversations in an effective way so that those conversations can move the needle the way we need it to.
Yeah, and one of the things I love is hearing the ways that we can do self-care that don't cost money. So it doesn't cost any money, right? To just turn off your phone and just relax,
Exactly.
and, read a book or just veg out or, take a walk in nature or, whatever it is that you're doing
Yep.
when you're decompressing away from all of the um, all of the knowledge that's coming to you, like you said, the news feed, the social media. And it's so funny that you said, like, when your friends text you. I mean, my friends and I, we probably text every day about the things that are going on. Like,
Exactly.
I know, did you hear this? So, like, what we gonna do about it? And sometimes,
Exactly.
right, oh, I'm totally just taking time away because I need to. Otherwise, it's just too much, right? I
Exactly.
can't. It's just too. I can't be emotionally hardly charged all the time, 24/7. It's just not healthy for us.
Exactly.
So before we go, we're almost close to time. I would love to hear about, so what are some takeaways that you want the audience to take from you? Any action steps that you think that our audience members can do fairly easily in the next day, 2 days, week, 2 weeks?
In general?
Yeah, in general. Yeah, in general, as we are really thinking about elevating, these racial injustices, and if they want to bring it to their own work or, just sort of, I think, action steps that, might feel good. And it could be, go read some literature, here's my favorite books.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to be education related, but I would just love to hear. I think one of the things that's really important to me is not just to have not to say that it's wrong with discussions, but not just another discussion. I also want people to feel like they can, take away something actionable, an actionable step that they can do.
Yeah, I would say aside from self-care, I am a huge proponent of self-care. And I know we probably heard that term more times than we would like to admit at this point. But I would say definitely take care of yourself and don't feel guilty about doing it. So that's one key takeaway because it goes a long way. Just taking care of yourself, you could be so much more productive when you're healthy and in a good space. The second thing I would say is this whole situation around racial injustice is such a big, it's such a big area to address. And I think sometimes you might feel overwhelmed because there's just so many layers. Everything is so intertwined, from education to our government to policies, the law, the police. Just how it's so ingrained, housing, that we feel overwhelmed when we think about the entire picture. So I would say, find out what you're personally passionate about, whatever sector it is. I'm sure there is work to be done in that sector. So find what you're passionate about and then go after kind of that niche area instead of trying to address everything in every industry across America, right? And then secondly, so that's the second thing. And then once you do that, you feel less overwhelmed. And that's what I did, because I'll say, I totally understand like the laws and I really want us to make progress there, but that's not my gift, right? The law and policy, you could run circles around me all day on that. But I'm passionate about growing and developing people. So I said, well, you know what, let me focus on coaching and mentoring the next generation of leaders and see how I can help shape that. So that's my niche. That's what I'm going to go after. So I would encourage everyone to do that. Find out what your niche is, what you're passionate about, and then focus there. And similarly, I've been stumped with this question. I've been asked this question countless times since this all came to light. I'll have people reach out to me and say, how can I be helpful? How can I get involved? And that's such a general and almost stressful question, because you're like, well, I don't really want to tell people how they can get involved. But I tell them what I just told you. I'll tell them there's so many areas of opportunity to help. What are you passionate about? And focus on that area, that industry. And then you'll find ways that, will align to your passions and how you can be involved.
I love that. Finding your passion and like really finding your niche, because I think it's so easy to spread yourself thin.
Yes.
try to do be everything to everyone.
Yes.
One of the things that we'll probably really get in depth about is the superwoman syndrome that a lot of Black women have, right? And so oftentimes when you're seen as a leader in one particular area, then everyone wants you for everything.
Exactly.
And how to say, like the power of no, like I can't, that's not me. Like I'm passionate about this. I don't mind knowing about the other things, but that's not my area. And so I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of energy. So I love that, Keauna. I think that's so helpful for people to remember to focus.
Yeah.
That's so good. Well, is there anything that I did not ask you about that you want to make sure that you tell our audience?
No, I think it was pretty comprehensive. I mean, if anyone wants to connect with me, Kwamara, they can reach out to you and you can put us in touch. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone may have that maybe I didn't address. And yeah, happy to connect offline.
Oh, perfect. So do you have any social media handles? Do you mind sharing, or a website there where people can reach you?
I do, but it's a little bit complicated. So my social media handle, at least on Instagram, is K Cheyenne, which is my middle name, which is CHIAUN, and then M for Mason. So K Cheyenne M. I know. I don't know what I was thinking when I came up with that handle. Obviously, I'm not marketing, which is another area you can run circles around me on. But right. But yeah, definitely feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, DM me, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. The email address is even worse than that, so I'm not even gonna go there. But Kwamara has my email address; she can connect us if need be. But thank you again for your time. Appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share my experience.
Keauna, no, thank you. Honestly, like it's a blessing when anyone says yes, because I know how much time and energy it takes and thought to be a part of this. So I really appreciate it. I will probably in a follow-up email to the audience, all the people who participated, put all of the panelists' social media handles on there so they can go ahead and connect with you and follow with you there. Keauna, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate you and your time and your thoughtfulness. So until next time.
Until next time. Love it.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.